The growing tension between the ponies and zebras scared her. She couldn't deny it. Talk of mega spells, balefire bombs, and spellfire. It shook her to her core. She tried not to think about it, but it was hard not to. No matter how many times she pushed it out of her mind, it would always find its way back into her thoughts. She hated conflict. Always had. To be honest, she was disgusted at the very word itself. But it seemed like everywhere she looked, she could see the evidence of it. In the papers, on the news, even ponies on the street were talking about the present conflict between the ponies and the zebras. She couldn't escape it no matter how hard she tried. Ever since the massacre in Little Horn Valley at Luna's school for gifted unicorns, things haven't been the same. Innocent lives were lost. She still remembered arriving at the scene that horrible day. The pink cloud emanating from within the school. The scent of it made her lungs feel like they were on fire, like they would burn right out of her chest. Her partner ordered her to stay back and help with the blockade, keeping every pony at bay while other officers and medics in special hazmat suits tended to the chaos within. She remembered wanting to help, but also understood he was trying to protect her from seeing all the death and from getting killed herself. The look in his eyes was one she wouldn't forget. He tried to be strong, but she could read the pain on his face. He knew what was inside, and he didn't want the images to haunt her for the rest of her life. Thinking back, she was grateful for it. She remembered the moment he told her that no pony had made it out, and the feeling of her heart hitting her stomach. She recalled vividly punching the door of their patrol cart and feeling him hold her to console her. She remembered catching a glimpse of a couple of gurneys being rolled out with body bags on them and looking away from the sight. Since that day, things changed. A lot had changed. Princess Celestia had been dethroned and Princess Luna took her place. The Ministry Mares were founded and efforts had been shifted on the conflict between nations. As a result, Stable Tech was created, and stables had begun to be built across Equestria. Adverts explained they were to help preserve life, to house and protect citizens in the event of a catastrophe. One had even been constructed nearby underneath the barn at Sweet Apple Acres. Stable 2. Although quite some time had passed since the tragedy, things hadn't calmed down. Talk of a nuclear fallout began to circulate, the end of the world itself. Ponies had begun signing up for the stables. At first, it seemed like preemptive precautions, but as of late, it seemed more real. So much so that she had begun thinking about it herself. And when the representative from Stable Tech showed up at her doorstep discussing the stables that were being built and how she could reserve her place in one, how could she not think about it? But she wondered if it would be worth it. If things did progress that far, could she survive underground? And how long would this peace last? She sighed as she took a sip of her fruit punch and looked around as she swallowed. Life was moving on as normal. Well, as normal as it could get. Ponies went about their business, some aware of the possible impending danger to pony kind, others blissfully unaware or just didn't think anything of it. At a glance, you wouldn't even think things had gotten so bad, but it didn't take much looking to see the evidence. It was all around. Stable Tech headlines in the paper, adverts on TV and on flyers in storefront windows, and billboards on roadways. The evidence was all around. Even if you managed to push it from your thoughts for just a second, it would always be waiting around the corner to greet you. The idea of a nuclear fallout seemed almost too crazy to be true. Yet with all the ads and warnings about it, it had become more clear that the danger was more of a probability than previously thought. Some ponies had even invested in their own private, personal shelters, building them or having them built in their backyards. Even when the idea of a stable being built near the town was realized, some ponies didn't think much of it. Some passed on the opportunities from stable tech, not believing they'd need a stable. Nothing of the sort had ever happened before. Why would it now? Others jumped at the chance, hoping to survive just a little longer and keep their bloodline going, even if it meant living underground or inside of a mountain. Ember looked up at the sky. It was clear, with just a few puffy white clouds floating by. Times like this made it easy to forget the fear, the tension, the war. She looked down at her drink, her thoughts bouncing around. She couldn't help but take comfort in such a simple pleasure as drinking her favorite drink. In times like this, a simple pleasure was just barely enough to help one keep their sanity. She sighed and glanced around her. Across the street, she saw a flyer in the window for a Nightmare Night party being held at the gymnasium, and one next to it advertising the Nightmare Night costumes available at Costume Corner. She couldn't help but smile. Nightmare Night would definitely help to take every pony's mind off the war, even if for just one day. She and her boyfriend had the day off, so that meant enjoying the festivities. She looked down at her watch. She'd go back on duty shortly and resume patrol. She looked back up and closed her eyes, listening as a soft breeze blew. Her ear twitched as a rustle caught her attention, and opened her eyes as she turned to see a newspaper lying at her hooves. On the front was another story about how the war was going, the economics, and the stables. The latest one had been opened a week ago, and ponies had already been reserving their place. Others in Manhattan, Philadelphia, Las Pegasus had also opened. With the use of magic, the stables had been finished quickly so ponies could start preparing. Ember thought of the conversation she had had with her boyfriend 2 weeks ago, about whether or not they should reserve a place. Adapting to a life inside a secluded place would be hard, if not impossible. Could they adapt? She wasn't claustrophobic, nor was Blitz. But having to live the rest of their lives underground in a stable surrounded by concrete and steel? No sunlight, no moon, no stars, no fresh air. She couldn't fathom the concept, yet the harsh reality was that it was a choice they had to make. Choose a stable, or choose death. Or would choosing a stable be death, like admitting to being placed inside a steel coffin and just waiting to die? Can I join you? She looked up and saw her partner standing next to the table, holding a cup of lemonade. She smiled a little.
Hey, yeah, sure. I'd be happy if you did.
He took a seat at the opposite end of the table, noting her demeanor. You okay? You don't sound like yourself. She smiled slightly, feeling better at the sound of his voice, which had a calming effect on her.
Yeah, I've just been thinking.
About the stable thing, right? Even though she could be brave, he knew she had fears. And these were ones he also shared with her.
Yeah, how'd you guess?
Been thinking about the same thing all morning. He sighed, leaning back. Seems like nearly every pony is talking about it at the station. She remembered hearing others talking about it while she was at HQ. It was basically the talk of the town, what with everything going on. Stables, stable tech, the future. There wasn't really a place to go without hearing it.
Remember what we talked about the other night?
Yeah. He sighed, leaning forward and resting his forelegs across the table. Listen, whatever's gonna happen, I'm gonna be right there with you. Just remember that. She gave a light sigh of relief.
Yeah, I know.
She gave a little smile, leaning forward and sliding a hoof across the table to rest on his.
The feeling is mutual.
A breeze blew around them. He looked up at the sky, seeing a few birds fly past. I don't know what's gonna happen, and it scares the heck out of me. She leaned back, feeling the unease in her stomach at the thought.
Yeah, it's hard not to think about it.
All this crap. He shook his head, lowering it. And ponies are gonna suffer for it. Innocent ponies. I can't stand it. I feel like I'm not doing a dang thing to help. If things do get bad, then what? And for what? She admired him for his care for others. He hated seeing others suffer, and she felt the same. It was one of the reasons they became cops.
Well, you are helping some pony, even if just one. You're helping me. I really don't know if I could handle all this if it weren't for you.
He leaned back. What are you talking about? You're the whole reason I'm staying together. I would have already cracked if you weren't keeping me in line. She couldn't help but laugh, and he did the same. After the laughter died down, she leaned forward, crossing her forehooves on the table as she spoke.
I'm just not sure if I could live in a stable, having to adjust to life in one in a flash. No more sunlight, no stars, no fresh air, no outside at all. It just...
She lowered her head down onto her arms.
Just seems stupid, having to throw away our lives for some stupid, selfish reason. This whole war. It's crap.
You're not the only one that feels that way. All of this for what? Power? Greed? It's bullcrap, but Stable Tech is insisting the stables will work. You remember that demo one we looked at? She lifted her head with a nod.
Yeah, it felt like it was one big casket. I could make it a few weeks, maybe a month or so, but a lifetime? I think I'd go crazy in there.
Yeah, that's what gets me. He agreed, shifting his weight to one side as he leaned to it. No pony knows how long the effects of a blast would last, or how long we'd have to be inside. It's a good thing neither of us are claustrophobic. This she had to snicker at herself. She truly admired how he could still have a bit of optimism even in a dark moment, and she was grateful for it. So are you glad we went ahead and reserved our spot? He asked. A few days before, they had went ahead and talked to a stable tech representative about reserving their place in a stable. The sales pony first came by Ember's place to talk to her about it. She hadn't decided and asked if she could come back the next day. That night, she and Blitz talked about it. They wanted to see a stable before they made their choice. The following day, they discussed it with the sales pony again. They went to view a stable demo at Stable Tech to see what it was like. It took some thought, but they both signed the forms and paid the fee, sealing their future inside a stable. She sighed as she thought about it.
I guess. Can't really give a better answer than that. In a way, I'm glad, but in a way, I'm not so sure. The idea of living longer is great, yeah, but is it bad that the idea of dying next to you is something I'm okay with? I mean, honestly, whether I'm in a stable or not, if I'm gonna die, I'd rather it be next to you.
If you're in the wrong for feeling that way, then I'm just as guilty. If I knew how it was gonna end, I'd want my final moments to be with you. He gave a little smile, and she couldn't help but feel her own heart twirl. They slid a hoof across the table to hold the others.
Listen, Blitz. Jeez, this is gonna sound so sappy. Whatever happens, promise me you won't leave my side. That you won't leave me alone.
I made that promise a long time ago, Em. She smiled back in response. Promise me the same thing? She cocked her head a bit, quirking a brow.
I'm your partner and your girlfriend. Why would I leave your side? I made a promise to stick by you, and I won't deter from that path.
Good. So, you want to come over tonight? We can talk about it over some spaghetti. She nodded.
Yeah, that sounds good. I better get going. I'll talk to you later, okay?
Yeah. Be careful. She rose from her seat, tossing the empty bottle into a recycling bin.
Got it. You do the same.
10-4, partner. Love ya.
Love you too. Later.
She took a step, starting down the sidewalk, when... Hey, Em? She turned back.
Yeah?
He gave her a comforting smile. Please don't stress yourself. We're in this together, no matter what happens. She smiled and walked over to him, placing a hoof on his.
I know. And thanks, dude. That means a lot.
He winked. Remember, pasta tonight. She winked back.
Wouldn't miss it for the world.
She started walking, giving him a glance back as she waved.
Later.
Later. She walked off, making her way down the sidewalk. She reached for the mic on her shoulder.
1 Bravo 34 to Central, show me 10-8.
As she walked, she looked up at the sky again. A slight chill was in the air, given that it was October. The 23rd, to be more precise. Decorations for Nightmare Night had long since been put up, and a costume party was to be held in the park later that night. But with all the talk of the stables as of late, that was the biggest thing on her mind. The idea of a small sense of normalcy was a comfort. Winter would soon be upon them, and with that, decorating for harsh warming. She tilted her hoof, checking the time. 9:23 a.m. Rounding the next corner, she heard what sounded like a shrill off in the distance. She stopped and looked around a bit. Then, she heard it. An explosion, which was followed by the screams of nearby townsfolk. She looked around, seeing the direction the ponies were looking and pointing in. She looked northwest and saw it, and her eyes went wide with shock. Cloudsdale, or where it used to be. The sky where the floating populace once was now empty, save for a plume of black and green smoke that rose up into the sky. What happened? Where's Cloudsdale? I saw a spell hit it. Her eyes widened as she instinctively turned to the mare she heard say those words. A spell? Could that mean? No, it couldn't possibly. In the distance, black and green smoke could be seen filling the air. It could be seen for miles. Whatever just happened was powerful enough to blow the entire city of Cloudsdale out of the sky. It would have taken a massive explosion to do that. Cloudsdale did have its own emergency services, but given the situation, she doubted many were functioning, and she knew that they needed every bit of help they could get. If they were even. She reached for the mic on her shirt.
1 Bravo 34 to Central. Cloudsdale. It's gone. Repeat, the city is gone. Something happened to it, I don't know what. There's fire and smoke. Roll all available fire and EMS to that location ASAP.
She looked back at where the once thriving populace once was, and broke into a run toward it. If a spell had hit the city, then the possibility of any pony surviving would be slim, if not, nothing. She didn't know how powerful the spell was, or the magnitude of it, but was certainly powerful enough to destroy the city. Just then, she heard the TV inside a nearby shop. It had a little static, but she could still hear it.
We got hit by a mega spell.
What?
She skidded to a stop in the dirt and bolted back to the shop, looking inside at the TV. The anchor pony was trying to act calm, but was clearly fidgety and anxious.
Reports are confirming that a spell had struck the city. It's unknown at this time where the spell came from, but Philadelphia was struck with a spell.
A spell? But that means...
Her words were broken by a wall of sirens as fire and medical personnel raced past her to the scene. She turned back to the screen, shaking her head slightly.
There's no way. Philadelphia? Now Cloudsdale?
She reached for her mic.
Officer Flame? Flame, do you copy?
Raw!
There was static again. The blast must have disrupted the signal, but she could still make out his words.
I'm on my way. What's your 20?
Haywood Drive.
She looked around, seeing the ponies already beginning to run for home or to the stable. She made her way out into the street to be easier to spot by her partner. She cast her gaze towards the plume of smoke again before hearing her voice being screamed. She turned and saw Blitz running toward her. As he caught up to her, she quickly spoke, not giving him a chance to stop.
Some pony said they saw a megaspell hit Cloudsdale.
I saw it. Her own eyes went wide, those words hitting her like a brick.
You saw the spell?
He nodded. The pain on his face was clear. Cloudsdale's gone. The whole city just... He shook his head. The memory burned into his mind. He'd never forget the image. The spell, the explosion, the debris. The city collapsing in a plume of smoke and green fire. One big... the whole city. He turned, thumping his hoof on a wall. I saw it, Em. She raised a hoof to his shoulder comfortingly.
What?
She couldn't imagine how horrific what he had seen must have been. He looked up at her. He knew there wasn't anything he, she, or any pony could have done. But that one spell meant one thing. It's starting. She froze and swallowed hard, trying to focus and rationalize.
Confirmed reports of hits in Manhattan and Philadelphia.
Ember and Blitz looked at each other as the TV broadcast reached their ears. They turned to the shop they were standing in front of to see the anchor pony adjusting his necktie nervously. They quickly closed the distance.
We have reports of megaspells having hit Manhattan and Philadelphia, along with Cloudsdale. Again, we have just received reports that Cloudsdale has been hit, along with Manhattan and Philadelphia. It's happening. The end. Every pony is advised to take shelter now.
The screen went to a standby slide. Air raid sirens. The haunting sound of the town's air raid sirens pierced the air. And in that moment, panic set in. The two officers looked at each other, their eyes filled with terror.
We have to get to the stable, now!
Ember grabbed Blitz's hoof as the two started to run, blinking back her tears and trying to suppress her fears. She reached for the mic on her shirt.
Officer Frost to all units, Officer Frost to all units, code black, repeat, code black!
She yelled as loud as she could to the town's ponies.
All residents, get to the stable, get to stable 2!
She knew the reality of the situation. They didn't have much time, as they had to evacuate as many as they could, and fast.
Attention, residents of Ponyville.
The loudspeaker for Town Hall came through as the mayor spoke.
All residents evacuate to Stable 2 at Sweet Apple Acre. This is not a drill.
The end. A nuclear fallout. The apocalypse. The end of the world.
Blitz.
I know, Em. She could also tell he was putting up a front. She'd been with him long enough to know he was also breaking up inside.
We need to get as many ponies as we can to the stable. But so many.
We just have to do what we can.
You better make sure you get there alive. Don't you dare die on me or leave my side. Got it?
Not a chance. He waved a hoof in the direction of Sweet Apple Acres. Every pony, heads to Sweet Apple Acres. Don't fight one another.
Let's go!
The two ran, directing ponies outside of the town. Ember skidded to a stop in the dirt and looked back to see Blitz had stopped and was looking up at the sky toward Canterlot. The city was being bombarded with mega spells. From Ponyville, they could see the explosions as they deflected off the shields they assumed the princesses had erected. Her pupils shrank.
No.
In the distance, she could see the sky glowing a sickly green. She could faintly make out the spells as they arched and began their descent upon the land. She shook her head, squeezing her eyes shut before opening them.
Come on, let's go!
The two started running again. As they neared the exit of the town, all heck was breaking loose around them. Ponies were screaming, crying, running, pushing, and shoving each other as they fought to get to the only safe place nearby. Her ears were filled with the cries and screams of bystanders. Turning around, she witnessed the ensuing chaos. Ponies knocked over each other in a fight for survival, in a race to save themselves from the incoming death that was raining down. Ember went deaf to the chaos around her as she looked back toward the sky, seeing the clouds now covering the sky.
Officers, this is Commissioner Blade.
Came an older voice over the mic.
This is it. From here on out, it's any pony's guess what's going to happen. I'm counting on all of you to help out and do your best. This may be our last transmission. So to all of you, thank you for your service, and may God be with you.
My bottom must not have been hit yet.
Or Las Pegasus in general. Blitz added. He reached for the mic. Commissioner Blade, this is Officer Flame in Ponyville. What's the status there? There was a few seconds of silence before the older stallion came back.
Nevada hasn't been hit yet, but we're already bracing for the worst. The East Coast has been hit, with Manhattan and Philadelphia being struck. I've also heard that Cloudsdale has also fallen from its place. What's it like there in Ponyville?
Bad, sir. Blitz said as he and Ember continued to run, making it out of town and across the bridge. The sky. It's...
I know. I can see it here, too.
Blade said. They heard him sigh.
It's actually come to me.
No. Look!
Blitz turned to see Ember looking toward Canterlot with wide eyes. He turned, and his own widened at the sight. A pink cloud was engulfing the city inside the protection spell. The city around the once thriving populace was now an eerie mix of green and pink. The spell flickered as if a scream. Then the spell shattered and vanished, the backdrop of green and pink painting a picture in her mind Ember knew she'd never forget. Sir, Canterlot is gone. Repeat, Canterlot is... Blitz's voice trailed off. Dang it!
We have to keep moving.
Ember grabbed his arm and pulled him forward as they continued to run.
Officer Flame, Officer Frost, get to a stable. There's still more you can do. We may not have a chance to speak anymore, so I want to say thank you.
Thank you, sir. Blitz said.
It was an honor, sir.
Ember said.
Thank you.
The transmission ended.
Every pony follow us!
Ember hollered as loud as she could over the screams and the sound of sirens in the distance.
Get to stable 2. Don't fight each other, just run!
They directed ponies to the outside of town, toward Sweet Apple Acres. Toward hope. In their sprint, they kept their eyes open for other ponies needing help. When a mare tripped over a fallen tree and fell, Ember and Blitz quickly stopped and helped her back up. As they ran down the dirt road and entered the apple farmlands, in the distance, rhoda birds were hovering and flying overhead. Stable tech technicians and other officers were rushing to help direct the crowd to the stable. Everything was happening so fast, it was hard to think. Above, the sky was glowing a brighter green. It was almost over. Everything was almost over. She prayed. She prayed as she ran, praying for just a little more time. Arriving at Sweet Apple Acres, stable tech officials and other officers were directing ponies inside the stable. A stallion began pushing his way through the crowd, knocking ponies aside, prompting Blitz to call out. Hey, stop pushing! There's plenty of room inside the stable for every pony! In a panic, the stallion ended up pushing Blitz, causing him to trip over a rock and hit the ground with a hard thud.
Blitz!
Ember skidded to a stop and ran back to him. Every pony for himself! The stallion cried as he glanced back to the two, continuing to run.
Screw you!
Ember yelled before turning back to Blitz, skidding to a stop and grabbing his arm.
Come on, we have to get moving!
She started to help him up, but he yelped in pain. Ugh. Dang it. My hoof's sprained. Bad.
We can make it.
No. He looked up at her. Don't wait for me. Her eyes widened as she froze.
What are you?
Get to the stable.
No. No!
You can start a new life, Em. She shook her head, gripping his hoof.
No freaking way. Not without you!
Dang it, Em. Why do you have to be so stubborn?
Because I love you, you idiot!
Her voice softened a little.
A new life without you, and it isn't the life I want. I'd rather die here with you than see tomorrow without you.
Jeez, you're stubborn as Tartarus. He smiled. But I love you for it. She smirked.
Likewise. Now come on.
She helped him to his hooves, swinging one of his forearms around her shoulder as she helped him run.
We're almost there.
The two made it up the hill and saw the barn in the distance, but they were farther behind than the rest of the group. Blitz feared they'd be locked out, and it would be his fault. Just leave me and get...
No.
Her voice was stern, determined. She looked at him, her blue eyes burning fiercely.
I'm not leaving you behind. Don't you get it? Either we live together or we die together.
But you've got a chance to continue living.
And what kind of pony would I be, huh? If I give up on you, I give up on us. I might as well put a gun to my own head.
Don't talk like that.
It's the truth.
She felt his strength leaving him, his leg too painful to keep him steady. But she kept pulling him. She couldn't, no, wouldn't give up.
If I lose you, I'll just die anyway. Will you leave me behind, even if I told you to?
He looked up to her, then back to the ground. He knew the answer without having to think. No, I wouldn't.
Then we're even.
She gave a slight smirk. He smiled back at her. Climbing the hill, they made it to the entrance to the apple cellar. A few guards were ushering ponies inside when the two officers made it up the hill.
Wait! We're coming!
Ember called out, getting their attention. A sound. One like she'd never heard before. A screech. A loud, eerie, soul-piercing wail came from overhead. She looked up just in time to see a green sphere streak across the sky, heading northwest.
Splendid Valley. Old May. Mary Pony facility.
The blast. The shake. Ember cried out as she fell to the ground. She felt the whole area vibrate around her. She managed to open her eyes just enough to see, and when she did, they shot open. Another green and black plume of smoke. The same one that rose up from Cloudsdale. In the distance, a cloud of green and black smoke rose up into the sky. "Inside, now!" One of the other Stable-Tech technicians shouted. Another Ponyville officer rushed over, grabbing Blitz by his other forearm as he and Ember helped the injured stallion inside. The cellar door closed behind them, the last guard making sure it was secure before he followed them down the stairs into the cellar. The group made their way down a corridor that connected to the apple cellar door to the stable itself. A few Stable-Tech officials were ushering ponies inside. Ember, Blitz, and the other Stable-Tech officials made their way up to the giant gear-shaped entryway. "Right this way." A Stable-Tech assistant motioned every pony through the large steel door. Ember and Blitz looked at the door as they waited for the few ponies ahead to enter, and followed them inside. As they entered the stable and started up a small stairway to the upper floor, a mare that stood by a control box pushed a button. A light began flashing as a warning siren began going off. Blitz leaned against a nearby wall, taking weight off of his leg. Ember continued holding his hoof, his arms still around her shoulders. Suddenly, she noticed something down the corridor out of the corner of her eye. She turned around to see a few other ponies running down the corridor toward the door.
Wait, there's still ponies outside. Let them in.
"No time. The door's closing," one of the Stable-Tech officials stated.
Stop it. You have to let them in.
She said frantically, glancing back at the door as a giant mechanical arm began closing it. "Once this closes, it can't be open."
No, please. They'll die out there. You can't leave them.
She ran down the steps and slowly stopped halfway to the door as it closed and sealed shut. With a blast of steam and grinding of steel, the door closed. The arm that pushed the door closed returned to its former position, and the flashing light and wail of the warning ceased. Ember stood there for a moment before walking to the door, feeling as low as dirt. Her eyes squeezed shut as she sniffed and leaned against the door.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
A hoof slammed against the door as she sniffed again, this time letting her tears fall freely. She pulled away from the door and took a shaky breath before wiping her eyes. She turned and started walking back up the stairs, her gaze lifted to that of her boyfriend, who held out a foreleg to her.
tried, Blitz. I tried. I really did.
She closed the remaining distance quickly as she embraced him, sniffing as she buried her face into his chest. Shh. I know you did. It's not your fault. You couldn't have saved them. No pony could. An older mare cleared her throat and gestured through a door into another room behind her.
Every pony right this way, please.
Blitz turned his head to look back as Ember lifted hers to see the other older mare. He looked back at the younger mare that he was holding. Come on, we better follow her. Ember lifted her head and nodded.
Yeah.
She sniffed, and he offered her a little smile, and she couldn't help but smile a little smile back. She mouthed a thanks before she helped him move off the wall. Following every pony else, they made their way down a corridor and underneath a lit sign that read Atrium. As every pony stopped in the room, Ember helped Blitz over to a nearby wall where he sat down, sliding to the floor with a heavy sigh. She sat down next to him, also giving a sigh. Their attention was directed to the crowd of ponies in the room. How long are we gonna have to stay down here? We can't live down here. What about every pony outside? The mare that led them into the room spoke into the intercom.
Please, everybody calm down. I know this is a very difficult thing to process, but we have to remain calm. We have to support and help each other while we're in the stable. Now, I want to have a moment of silence for those that didn't make it today. May their memory live on and their spirit watch over their loved ones.
Silence fell across the room as most ponies bowed their heads. Ember and Blitz did the same and lifted them when they heard the mare speak again.
I know many of you have questions and concerns, so please come to me.
A guard stepped up to the two officers, handing them each a blue shirt. Every pony has to wear these. Blitz unfolded the garment and held it up, then turned around, noting the yellow 2 on the back. Not exactly a fashion statement. Ember rubbed his arm, giving a comforting smile.
Hey, we're together, and that's what's important. We'll make it through this.
Why didn't you leave me behind? Because of me, you almost got caught in the blast. Her head leaned back against the wall, giving a soft smile.
Don't blame yourself. It wasn't your fault. And we made it, didn't we? Life without you in it isn't a life for me at all. I wasn't leaving you behind.
Yeah. Blitz sighed and rubbed a hoof down his face. He returned her a smile. Don't know what I'd do without you.
Same here.
They touched foreheads together before the mare spoke up again, making them look up.
Welcome to Stable 2. I am the Overmare. Once you put on your uniform, we will have a meeting here. The guards will show you to your rooms.
She smiled. Ember looked around the room. It was horrible. No windows, no real color. Just a dull room with nothing to spice it up. She wondered if she could really live like this, and for how long. Well, I think it sucks. Her thoughts were drawn back to reality as Blitz stepped into her room, looking at his new uniform. Well, beggars can't be choosers, I guess. She couldn't help but give a little smile.
Well, it doesn't look bad on you.
Yours looks better, he remarked. It's more form-fitting to your, form. He rubbed the back of his neck shyly.
Well, I'm flattered you noticed, Hotshot.
He looked around the room. It was no different than his. Guess this is our new life, huh? She sighed as she looked around, leaning back a bit.
Yeah, I hate it here, but we don't have a choice.
We'll just have to adapt the best we can, he said, leaning against the wall. Make the best of it however we can.
Yeah.
Her head hung low. She looked distantly at the floor.
I'm wondering if we'd have been better off outside. At least it would have been quick.
Maybe. But hey, you've got me.
And you've got me.
There was a brief moment of silence as the two shared a comforting smile.
Hey, Blitz.
Yeah?
Thanks. I don't know what I'd do if you weren't here.
He walked a bit closer. What are you talking about? If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have made it into the stable. I owe you my life. I need to thank you. She shook her head a bit.
No need. I did it because I wanted to.
She patted the bed next to her, and he walked over to sit down next to her.
How's your hoof?
She glanced down to his bandaged hoof as she pointed a hoof at it. He held it up, giving it a wiggle. Still sore, but it's okay. The splint is really helping. You did a dang good job with it. She gave a dismissive wave of her hoof.
No big deal. Just a little medical training.
Maybe you should try your hoof in the infirmary. I'm sure they could use some pony like you. He suggested.
I'll think about it, but I've still got a duty as a cop. If they even have need of that.
We can still be guards, he said optimistically, giving her some renewed hope. I'm sure you'll figure out how to use that... What did they call it?
Pip-buck.
Yeah, that thing. I'm sure you'll be working with that in no time. She gave a light chuckle.
And you won't?
He snorted. Oh, yeah, sure. Give or take several years. She had to laugh, and it felt good. Even during that moment when the world was falling apart outside, it was such a comfort having some pony there. Some pony that she cared for that felt the same about her. And to laugh.
I'll help you figure it out, dude.
Thanks. She leaned into him, nuzzling him as she hid her face in his side.
Can you do me a favor?
Sure, what do you need? She looked up to him.
I feel stupid asking this, but would you mind spending the night with me tonight? After today, all that's happened.
Sure. He said with a gentle nod. She saw him smile and found herself smiling back. She just wanted to be sure he was there, to feel him, to make sure the world wouldn't rip him away from her. I was going to ask you if you wanted to spend the night with me, but I was afraid I'd sound too forward and that you'd smack me upside the head. He gave a silly grin, and she had to laugh.
I trust you. I wouldn't have asked if I didn't. And no, you wouldn't have been too forward.
She moved her arms around his waist.
Thanks, Blitz.
He moved an arm around her, pulling her close. Anytime, Em. We'll get through this. I know we can.
Yeah, me too.
Life in the stable moved forward slowly. Day by day, the events of the last day became more distant, though it would never be forgotten in the minds of those that lived through it. Ember and Blitz continued to carry out their duties as guards for the stable, with Ember working as a medical assistant from time to time. In the months that followed the sealing of Stable 2, Blitz proposed to Ember, and she happily said yes. The two were married in the atrium and lived the next several years in the stable happily married. Ember later gave birth to a healthy baby, adding another spark of life to her and Blitz's family. As time passed, Blitz and Ember taught their child the ways of the old world. They regretted that their child never grew up to see the sunrise, the sunset, the moon, or the star, or to know the beauty of the world outside. They hoped that someday the stable door would open and life on the surface could begin again. But that time never came. Still, the family of three were happy. They had each other and made many fond memories together. Ember and Blitz both lived many more years, until the day when their time slowed to a stop. The two passed away in their sleep together, leaving behind their child and their two grandchildren. Their child would always remember the smile the couple wore as they passed away peacefully, knowing they had been together until the end. Like their parents, the child grew up hoping that one day the door to Stable 2 would open up. But that day never came, because it was in Stable 2 that ponies were born. It was there they would die, because in Stable 2, no pony ever enters, and no pony ever leaves.